Right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this webinar today. It is one in a series of events we've been holding as part of our Democratising finance series. Today, we're going to be focusing on community energy and people-led investing. And very pleased to welcome my guest today, Hugh Goulbourne, who is one of the directors at CO2Sense and General Counsel. Welcome, Hugh.
Hi, Lisa. How are you?
Yeah, very good, thank you. So we're going to talk about how we've both been working within this space of helping to democratise finance and to really turbo boost the community energy sector in the UK. Some of our aspirations for the future to accelerate it even more. And we're going to be focusing in on a bit of a case study as well, which is Energise Barnsley. Apologies to Andy and Beth who can't join us today, but we'll do our best to represent everything about that project, which is demonstrating really great impact in the UK. So first of all, Hugh, do you want to just give a quick intro to yourself and perhaps we could also just outline how Ethex and CO2Sense first started a business relationship, and then as we go through the webinar, we can talk a little bit more about how things have progressed over time.
Yeah, no, happy to do that, Lisa, and thank you for inviting me to join you this afternoon. I mean, I guess that it's an exciting time for us to be talking about community energy. It's one of my passions in life. I have been a director of CO2Sense for about 5 or 6 years now. I was also involved in its initial setup between 2011 and 2013 when we were initially set up by the Regional Development Agency with some funding from the UK government. And the idea as it was at the time, yeah, as I say, my background is I'm a lawyer, as you said. I'm the general counsel as well for CO2Sense. Spent quite a lot of time in kind of corporate law in the city before coming into the community energy sector. And so for me, having the opportunity to talk about it at the moment, in this time when I think there's a real spotlight on community energy is really exciting for me, because I first got involved in a community energy project in Shoreditch and Hoxton when I was about 20 years ago. I think it was one of the first of its kind, a district heating project. I was a trustee of the Shoreditch Trust, so a non-executive trustee that sort of championed that programme. And I saw, I think, a lot of the things that we're going to go on and talk about in relation to Energise Barnsley, a kind of appetite amongst lower income households, as there were in social housing, for decarbonisation, especially when it can ensure a resilient energy system and ensure lower prices as well. So that kind of triple impact. And so that's why I've been a champion of community energy for coming on for 20 years. It's why continuously when I've been at CO2Sense, I've always been keen that we support it. It's not the only area that we invest in, but I think it's where our focus really is now, at the moment, particularly with the new government being so committed to local power, and will be where our focus will be for the next few years. I think in terms of Energise Barnsley, as I say, I think it's a brilliant example of how a diversified community-owned renewable energy system can keep the lights and heating on. I mean, as we'll see, it's on pensioners' households mainly. It locks profits into the local area, and of course, we first got involved with Ethex. I think this is correct. What was about 5 or 6 years ago, wasn't it? That we invested through our then match funding arrangement with Ethex. I think it was 100k we put in, which helped to build that initial crowd around the Energise Barnsley program. I think they're on to their second, third, fourth fundraise now, aren't they? So that was just the first one. Tiny baby steps a few years ago, but now they're really doing well. And I think our ambition now going forward is to continue to work with you, Ethex, and others in the space to make it easy for investors to deploy capital into the clean energy revolution and the community energy revolution.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Hugh. And myself, Lisa Ashford, CEO of Ethex, I should have started with that. We're one of the direct impact investing platforms in the UK, and I would say our 80% of our 120 million or so that's been raised over the past 10 years has been into community energy. So really important sector for us. And personally, I've had development experience with a local hydro project as well, actually. So again, a personal passion, which is always good, and you find all the people that work in this sector are generally, really personally passionate about this. And Energise Barnsley, I think, first set up in 2015 with this ambition to try and put solar on the roofs of thousands of social housing in Barnsley, and has really had quite a significant impact, I think, in the sector in demonstrating what is truly possible. And in the theme of democratisation, I think what is really important is that the benefit is really going down to individuals. So, and that's what's particularly great about this model is, individuals in the UK are investing in a scheme that is helping other individuals in the UK who largely are suffering fuel poverty, and CO2Sense coming in to help boost that and create more leverage. So I'm going to try and share my screen just to start to play a little short video of Energise Barnsley. So bear with me while I try and do that. And hopefully it will play ball.
The electricity, I did cut down on. To be honest, I've got an electric fire, so I never use that. Switch lights off. Yeah, it was scary. It was a scary time.
Energise Barnsley is a community benefit society with its core principle to deploy more low carbon technology, solar PV, for example, for residents, and then for any surplus from it to go back into the community. Our first major project was to deploy solar PV and to encourage local people to invest via a bond offer, and to give the electricity which is generated to the tenants for nothing. We've got 17 commercial sites where solar PV has been put on. So we went and visited Springvale Primary School. It's got 26 kilowatt peak on the roof, saving £4,000 to £5,000 per annum.
So I was interested in making an investment in the local community, and for me this was made even more important because my children went to this school, and so I feel as though I'm really keyed into the local efforts to help produce renewable energy and reduce the carbon footprint.
We've done a series of innovation projects. Smart Solar one was specifically on an older group to see if we could install 75 batteries in order to increase their savings. The tenants where we've installed it, they've had savings between £200 and £400 for the last 2 years per annum. So when solar was first deployed, it was all what we call spilt to the grid, because ultimately we don't use solar in the middle of the day. So all a battery is doing is preventing a lot of that spill going to the grid, and then you use it in the evening.
Right, as long as these lights are on, even if there's only one bar, a green light, I know that this is working and my electricity is free. Now when my battery's powered up at night and it's cold, I'll shut my room door and I will put my electric fire on to warm that room up so I don't have to use my gas central heating.
We've had stories from tenants where they've basically stopped doing things because they're worried about what the cost might be, and this freed up that kind of worry, and tenants feel now that they can put the dryer on if they need to later on in the evening.
Good. Well, there's a short clip of Energise Barnsley and all of the great work that Andy and Beth are doing, and some of the individuals who are benefiting from the lower cost electricity, and obviously seeing also the development of that project into also starting to power schools as well. So, starting to build out that portfolio, which is also really interesting for the financials of the overall project. And I think what is really interesting from this point of view as well is the buy-in from local council, so Barnsley Council, right from the get-go. I remember going to a meeting and for the launch in Barnsley Town Hall many years ago, and the council obviously were so vested in this particular project. It's quite unusual. Hugh, you definitely talk to councils and other renewable energy projects. How do you see this differing from some of the other ones that you've seen, and that sort of local council participation?
Yeah, no, we do, Lisa, and I think you've identified perhaps one way in which this is quite well. I guess two ways in which this is quite unique, right? One is being able to provide lower cost electricity to households specifically. I think quite a lot of the community energy projects you see around the country are more like the schools example that was talked about there, or libraries. I think some NHS buildings as well. Generally community centres and that kind of stuff, sports centres I think I've seen as well. So I think this is a bit unique in terms of being able to also reduce costs for actual homeowners, particularly those who are vulnerable or in fuel poverty. And I think it's a great example of that. And hopefully we'll see more of those sorts of projects happening in the rest of the country. I think the other point you made is a really good one as well, around it being effectively, I think it's a quasi joint venture, isn't it, between the community group and the local authority. I think Barnsley is well known for being quite a forward-looking council. I think both the chief executive there and the leader of the council have got a very strong track record of having tried a few different models, some more commercial models. And let's just hope more local authorities can go that way, particularly given current funding constraints. I think councils probably need to be more flexible and look at new ways of doing things. As I guess you alluded to, we are an industry partner, of UK 100, which is obviously a group of some of the councils in the country that are most committed to decarbonisation, and so we talked to some of those councils about some of their ambitions. I think a lot of them are looking at the Energise Barnsley model and trying to think about how they can come alongside that. It's not always easy for councils, let's be honest. A lot of their estate is constantly changing in terms of ownership models and financing models. So there are some challenges there to do exactly what Barnsley's done, but let's hope more of them come alongside this. If we can just say a couple more things as well, Lisa, because I think what the video maybe didn't bring out, which I think is important to bring out about community energy, is also I see two other impact areas, right? There's and I think these are really important in terms of public perception, because if we expand this debate a little bit, and I think it's probably not a bad day to do that on, the debate around net zero and decarbonisation can at times be a little bit polarising. And I see community energy as a way of it's a way of getting through that, right? Because I think there are concerns sometimes that net zero is expensive, that it's not giving the social impacts, the reduction in price, et cetera, to households and communities. And I think community energy enables us to do that, and that's why I've always really strongly supported it. We've already talked about the price reduction for homes or for community centres, but there's also the piece around, most community energy groups, as you know very well, and I know, tend to set up a community fund where they put some of the surplus from the power purchase arrangement that they put in place. So, and then that returns benefit to the community. There's a whole range of things that are done with those community funds, from helping subsidise local groups who are doing things, or improve a local park, etc. So I think that's one way in which I think it's really important to say these are different, say, purely commercial entities that are not owned by the community. And then I think that final point is about community ownership. So that particularly at the moment, we hear a lot of talk in the public policy sphere around economic growth and growth being spread across all communities. Well, Energise Barnsley is a great example again there, right, of a community in the north of England, often seen as having areas of quite high deprivation, and this is through your platform your platform in relation to Energise Barnsley, you're also giving an opportunity to local people to invest, right? Whether it's £50 £10, whatever, to put in an investment and get a return on their investment. And I think that's really important in terms of democratising finance, but, and to unpack that phrase, opening up opportunities for smaller investors to be able to get a return from the net zero transition, which I think is a point that's often missed, and I think is really important to what you're doing and what Community Energy does.
Yeah, thank you. And we're looking at that particular project where they're cutting carbon emissions by up to 800 tonnes per year, as well as saving tenants around 66% of their energy bills. So you're absolutely right, that impact is absolutely direct into that community, which is quite unique. And by having those very small ticket sizes, so from £50, people being able to invest, it really does open up the whole concept of investing to perhaps a group that wouldn't ordinarily be able to access more traditional financial service investments, and actually may not truly understand them. And I think that is the beauty of community energy as well, the tangible nature of the projects. And because this is effectively funding a specific activity, it's much easier for people to understand than more of a generic financial product where they don't really understand where the money's going or where the return is coming from. And, there may be little to no impact. So it's a real opportunity for community energy to sort of talk to a much broader audience if we can create cut through. And, I think Energise Barnsley winning, several awards, is a really good step towards getting that credibility. And we as an industry need to work out how we do a better job of making sure that this comes in front of people such that they can, consider it, and we can help people understand what it's all about. And I guess we're talking to medium-sized to small investors, and you're talking now to some larger investors. So in that mix, they can all work together. It's not necessarily investment being available just for very high net worth individuals. There's a whole spectrum of potential for individuals, which hopefully is, true sense of the democratisation.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really important point as well, isn't it? I mean, so I wouldn't put us in the large investor category, but we are an institutional investor, and so we've been involved in the journey for quite a number of years, and we've been able to invest alongside, as you're saying, pretty small investors, everyday investors in local communities who want to support, as in Energise Barnsley or in other places, who just want to support something that is tangible, that can see it's going to make a difference. And I suppose also, as I guess you're sort of saying, invest in something they trust, right? I mean, we're living in a pretty volatile capital markets world at the moment.
Yeah.
It's probably an understatement. You generally don't, these projects generally don't return a huge, we're not talking sort of private equity type investments. So it's not a huge return on investment, but I guess it's fairly secure. And I think from my understanding, you've had very few defaults on projects from your platform. So this is pretty good investment, pretty sound, pretty secure. You can see, as you said, you can see the assets, so you can watch it every day if you want to monitor it. And you're doing some good with it as well. So I think there's a lot to like there for individuals. There's a lot to like for us as an institutional investor as well. And if it can mean, in addition to the benefits we've talked about, and our top line impact is obviously decarbonisation. That's why we were set up in the first place. But we like to see the social impact as well. And if it also means we can help crowd in, as you're saying, more local investors, many more people allowed to participate and get on that journey of understanding investment and understanding energy and the just transition, then even better. And one of our main aims, I think, for this next 2-3 years in terms of our own horizon scanning is to try and encourage more institutional investors. As you said, we are talking to quite a wide pool at the moment to encourage larger scale individual investors as well. To come alongside, to perhaps pool their investments and enable more community energy projects to get onto platforms like Ethex, and encourage more individuals to come in and crowd in and invest. So that's very much our focus and our agenda at the moment.
How can we make that happen? Because, as you said, institutions, maybe foundations, family offices, they might be looking at, as you said, very volatile, listed equity returns at the moment, bond markets going crazy. This could look like a relatively stable investment with community energy having a really good track record, as you said. So what do we need to do to increase that institutional participation?
Well, I think when we speak to those types of investors, one of the things we often hear is they want it to be made as easy as possible, I guess. Sort of if they can write one check, I suppose, that would then be used over multiple projects, that would probably make it easier for them in terms of their own decision making, their due diligence and other things. So one of the things we are actively working towards in cooperation with others is the establishment of some sort of pool fund that would enable those investors to sort of take one look at this, make a decision, commit a not insubstantial amount of capital over a period, which could then be used to invest in a mix of, I guess, community shares, community bonds through your platform and others, and then perhaps also do some direct sort of short-term and other loans as and when needed into community energy groups. Because, as you know, community energy groups, I think, are kind of starved of capital all the way through their journey. I certainly discovered that in Shoreditch. You start with your kind of hopefully getting a few grants from various different places to start the project off, get yourself up and running, get some feasibility studies done. If it gets serious and you can get into planning, then you need your kind of capital to actually buy the kit and put it in place. And that's quite a lot of finance. Obviously, they can raise that through your platform and others, but that can take some time, as you know. So if they can have some short-term debt as well, then that's good. But as we know, not just for community energy groups, but generally smaller businesses in this country, it's very hard to raise that kind of capital. So if we can help in that space, then I think it helps as well. And then once you're into deployment, it's funny, once you're into deployment and you're operational, these projects are much easier, aren't they, to run, and it's much easier to get finance. And often you can refinance and reduce your kind of interest rate at that stage as well, and the profit and the project potentially becomes more profitable. So I think if we can help at various places along that cycle, that's great. I think obviously when you're investing in particularly institutional investors' money, it's quite hard to do it at the early stage. And so I guess what all of us are hoping, Lisa, is that governments in particular will continue to help groups at the front end in terms of offering grants and other forms of finance for feasibility and other studies, because I think that'll be absolutely critical to keep building the pipeline. But we will continue to do what we can do in terms of bringing finance in at the later stages.
So I suppose that's the $1 million question, isn't it? is, to what extent will GB Energy help to pump prime the sector by providing development capital, which is very scarce and much needed.
Yeah.
And, do you have any other insights on that yet?
I guess what we can gauge from is what we're seeing in the public domain, right? So I think it was really encouraging that last month they made, I think it was 200 million announcement, wasn't it, in terms of some money directly into the health sector, some local authorities, schools program, which I think is great, and then a renewal of what I understand is basically the Community Energy Fund as we've known it for the last few years. So allowing net zero hubs enabling net zero hubs to continue to provide feasibility grants and stuff. So that's great. I think that gives us reassurance that we're all going in the right direction. I think we all wait to see what's going to come out of the comprehensive spending review and next year's settlements for the next 2-3 years as we go up to 2030. I think that's what we're all hoping is going to announce much longer term and greater amounts of funding. And I guess I'll just say one more thing, Lisa, because I suppose that responds directly to the question about grants and money for feasibility and stuff. But I know from conversations we have with other institutional investors and some professional high net worth that government could probably also underwrite some of the risk for some of those investors as well. And I think that's where we're quite interested to see what will emerge from GB Energy and others, is how they might be able to help us de-risk some of all of this for other investors. Because as you'll know, the less and less there is a perception of risk, the more investors are willing to kind of open up their checkbooks. Albeit, as we've said before, this sector doesn't feel like there's much risk in it, because the track record, as you've said, on most of your projects has been pretty strong, if I understand it.
So just coming to some of the questions as well as we go along. We talked about financing as a key barrier. There's a question around other key barriers. And, I know that grid infrastructure is often a problem for many in terms of cost and accessibility and availability of grid capacity, which, is definitely something that requires further attention as well. What else are you seeing?
Yeah, no, that's true. I think access to there's a long queue now, isn't there, for people trying to get into grid connections and that kind of stuff, which needs to be cleared up. I mean, one of the things we made a submission alongside others to the select committee that's currently doing an inquiry into community energy, and I think one of the points we've made alongside others is one of the ways that government could say, well, policymakers could support community energy would be potentially to say community energy projects go further, automatically go higher up that queue, right? And that would then be a premium really for community energy projects, or even projects that were commercially led but had a community share attached to them. I think that would make it more attractive, wouldn't it, for private finance then to come into that space. So I think that's one space where government could do something to help in terms of policy levers. I think there's other challenges. I mean, potentially, I suppose, having more power purchase agreements available from some municipal organisations. We talked about councils and others, right? If they provided some of those longer term ones more guaranteed, then that would help underwrite some of the costs for community energy groups. I think that'd be quite an interesting thing. And I know some people are looking at that in terms of local authorities. I think for talking on behalf of investors, I know obviously in the past we had things like the feed-in tariff, which helped attract investors. There were tax breaks as well. I think potentially looking at things around VAT or EIS type tax breaks, which I know used to apply, then again, that might be something that might be quite attractive as well. I know all of these things have been discussed and debated. I don't suspect we'll get all that support, but I think there are some things that could help, certainly from an investor perspective.
And I think, to someone's question, what about some of the projects that are lower return? So there might be, 4%, potentially under base rate, which might be a harder sell for if you're asking individuals to invest. What about blended finance and grant money to support those types of projects? Or, do we just need that tax incentive to boost that return to make those projects more commercially viable? Maybe a combination of the two.
I guess it's a combination of the two. Yeah, I'd say investors are going to be wanting to seek some comfort, aren't they, around some of that? Whether that's some form of government underwriting and or some form of subsidy, whether it's a tax break or a preferential. Contracts for difference and stuff would help, but they're not. They don't quite underwrite that risk in quite the same way. So I think, I've been quite. You mentioned hydro, didn't you? I know we certainly, over a decade ago, we sort of helped get some hydro projects going, community-led ones, and they're still out there and they're great and they're brilliant. But I think, as I understand it, at the moment, they're quite a challenge to do now that the feed-in tariff has been removed. So I think there are certain technologies, certain locations and stuff where if we want to see these things go ahead, there is going to have to be some additional support in some way. And some of the more impactful applications, such as a blend of kind of generation of electricity and then heat load, whether it's a district heating system or a set of heat pumps all connected to a central. There's some fantastic sort of proof of concepts being done. I think like the Net Zero Terrace Streets type project, all of which I suspect to get off the ground will need a bit more support as well in some way or other. And I think let's not forget a lot of the government targets are set for 2030. Now that feels like a long way away, but that's only in terms of developing this pipeline and getting these projects consented. We're on the critical path now, aren't we, to 2030?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we certainly want to fund 100 more community energy projects by then. So, we have to look at what do we need to get there. And I think you've mentioned, quite a number of these tools, whether it be match funding or underwriting, tax reliefs, government support for development. It's all got to play its own part, hasn't it? And what about seeing more replication of the types of Energise Barnsley projects? How can we see 10 more of these projects across different towns?
Yeah, the really good question. One of the things we have picked up from talking to partners within the UK 100 system or ecosystem is, and outside of that as well, is a lot of local authorities are interested in supporting in supporting community energy. And there are a lot of community energy groups. I go everywhere I go and meet people. There are lots more people coming up saying, I've heard about, I was in Grimsby recently, I was down in Nottingham last month. There's lots of what I'd call social entrepreneurs, community entrepreneurs now looking at it. They've heard of the model, they want to do something in their area. And I think there's some great work being done already by the Net Zero Hubs and others around them to try and help those entrepreneurs understand the structures, the legal structures, the first steps, what they should be looking at, who they should be talking to. And I think that's great. That will help push this along. But I think also there's probably something around, and you sort of alluded to it, how do you help people like Andy and Beth at Energise Barnsley kind of grow and scale so that, they're not just working in Barnsley, but they could also be working in Bolton and Bury and, I'm mentioning all the Bs just because it's convenient, I suppose, but similar sized towns across the north of England, all of whom are probably going to have fairly similar opportunities, smaller local authorities, who don't really have the capacity or the resource to deliver some of this. So I think there is a question there around how you almost help these sort of community energy developers scale up and reach scale. I suspect that they're going to struggle to get that finance from banks or traditional investors. So I think, again, there's a question maybe for government and GB Energy, as you sort of said, around will they put some medium-term loans out there, low interest medium-term loans available for those sorts of groups. They can take some risk in terms of expanding. Could they even take some quasi-equity type interests so that the risk is shared between those groups, and who are going to be taking considerable risk, right? If they want to go into some of these other areas and putting time and effort into it, could they? Yeah, I'd say probably more quasi-equity would be a better way of looking at it.
I suppose, you've got different models, haven't you? Because you've got more of the council municipal bonds where the councils are doing it themselves if they're doing some environmental project on their own balance sheet, or you've got the model where councils are partnering with communities who are doing the projects off balance sheet or separately and owned by the community.
And you probably want both, Lisa.
Exactly.
You probably, and even in a given geography, in a certain local authority area, you may well want both. I'm not sure I see it as an either or, because there may be some assets that need.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking about Plymouth Community Energy as well as a, very early mover where, the council saw a problem with fuel poverty and wanted to also utilise their assets to help fund programmes to help solve that fuel poverty, and then spun out the Community Benefit Society to raise finance and do the project development for assets on council building roofs. A really early mover, and it does require those very forward thinkers at councils, doesn't it, who are prepared to stick their neck out and really champion different disruptive models.
No, it does, and I think all of that's right. I guess I also would say, particularly in the current financial climate, even the very large councils, but certainly the smaller ones, so the ones that we're thinking, like I mentioned, like the Berries and the sort of West Lancashire's, that type of council, given the constraints that they're under now in terms of spending and being able to take on more resource and just general headspace for councillors or either elected members or for officers, I kind of would think that some of them would more like the second option, right? So that, some of them might be able to get their heads around municipal bonds and do something with abundance and that kind of stuff. But I would have thought more likely they would like to be working with entrepreneurs in their local community to try and deliver some of this. And so I just think if there's a way of us empowering and enabling some of the people who already do fantastic projects in a slightly different geography to kind of spread their knowledge, spread their capacity, grow their capacity into some of those communities, I think it would really help. But as I say, it would need some financial instrument that enables them to get that extra capital, working capital, just for 3 or 4 years, so they can do it.
And there's some really interesting comments coming through about, how can we use carbon credits to help, boost the finances? Might be some challenges with that, with double counting, but what about where councils have sold off social housing? Is that a problem in terms of the ownership structure? And that's a really good point as well, because I know the contracting for Energise Barnsley was probably one of the most complex areas to the whole thing. So that could be something which could be quite difficult in that situation. But, what would you say is what are your sort of parting comments in terms of your own role in helping to scale up and replicate in the next couple of years?
Yeah, no, I mean, those are all great. You're right, all great comments and questions, and there's more coming through. And I saw that somebody said something around there was only 5 million announced by government specifically for community energy, which I think is right. Yeah, so there is a lot. We are hoping that more will be announced by government. And I also saw, before I come to those points, I did also see a question around kind of my point about boosting community projects up the grid connection pipeline. So a really good question. And I think who's championing that? I mean, government hasn't given a response. The select committee was certainly very interested in that concept when a few of us appeared. And I think the people who are championing it, or we're championing it. I don't know if Community Energy England is. I know other organisations like Thrive Renewables, Better Society Capital and others are all championing those sorts of ideas as well. Anything that can just help give community energy a push, I think, and encourage private investors to want to involve the community, I think is something we're all trying to push. And I guess in terms of my parting shots, I think, first of all, well done to everyone in Barnsley, as you said, the council and others, both the council and Andy and Beth, in terms of bringing forward that project. I think they've obviously got plans to continue to scale. I know they're doing a really interesting pilot with Northern Power Grids at the moment, looking at kind of how you create a community district operator. So effectively looking at that kind of local energy supply type option, which is, I guess, the holy grail for all of us in this space. If you could get to that locational pricing, a kind of almost local supplier type arrangement, local pricing, etc., that would be huge for the sector. So yeah, let's hope Energise Barnsley can continue to innovate, can continue to spread their model. Other councils start to pick it up. As I think I've said, I think it's not one size fits all. I think you need everything. I think you need local authorities. I think you need CMIs, community municipal investments. I think you need obviously your platform as well, and crowd sharing and all of that. And I think you need a wider pool of funding, which is where we'll be spending our time, I think, mainly, is just trying to get that wider pool of sort of sophisticated investors to invest, and then enable more match funding into your platforms, and then also some other instruments to provide that kind of short-term, medium-term debt as and when needed by community energy groups. And I suppose my final point would be, let's just hope government continues to support the local power plan. I think they've got really great ambitions in it. We're looking forward to seeing the detail. And I think, as that question alludes to, I think it'll need to be more than £5 million in terms of delivery. I think the promise was £1 billion, wasn't it? So I think we need nearer to that. Our estimates are that actually this sector, to reach its targets by 2030, would need, I think, 16 times. I think that's 16 times where we are at the moment in terms of local power. So we estimate that's at least £4 or £5 billion needed. And if government were to put in, say, a fifth of that, I think that would help us all, ourselves, raise the private investment that's needed alongside that.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Hugh. And thanks, everyone, for your comments and questions. And for those of you who've been crowdsourcing answers as well. Really helpful, and I hope that was an interesting discussion. Thank you, Hugh, for all your contributions, and look forward to speaking again soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Lisa.